So before we start on the program, I will introduce a little bit about Iliad itself. And to do that, I will share my screen. So this is the project, Iliad, the digital twin of the ocean. And this is the program for today, Introduction to Data Spaces for Digital Twin of the Ocean. First, we will learn about data spaces, the concepts, and also something about the data lakes and repositories, etc. That will be done by Arne-Jørgen Berre. Then we will get an overview of data spaces in Europe, and particularly the AD4GD project. And I leave that to Joan Maso to explain what that is. And the third presentation will be the GREAT project, a Green Deal Data Space Foundation and its community of practice that will be introduced to us by Mattia Santoro. And we will have a link also in this, some linkage to digital twins, of course. And the main part here will be the discussion. So digital twins, just to remind you, it's interoperable and data intensive and cost effective representations of the real world, in virtual environment, representing both the ocean and the activities and things we put in the ocean. And we will also be able to, a twin will be running complex predictive management scenarios and have multiple innovations across different disciplines, sensors, models, and digital infrastructures in general. So Iliad in a seashell is that we are creating this federated ecosystem of interoperable digital twins. It will be based on existing systems, but also we will adding value and adding new data and information. We create a marketplace where you can shop around the entire twins or bits and pieces of components of the twins. And in total, these are solutions that will help answering or solve problems in our society. The twins are covering multiple sectors, as I said, and you see here it's wind farms, it's jellyfish swarms, it's insurance and aquaculture, and you see there are multiple disciplines covered, and they are thematic and also geographically dispersed. This is a short overview of the project. This slide deck is also included in the material you will get, so I don't want to go into details here, but you see it's a substantial investment by the European Union and the 56 partners that we represent. So I'm the host here. I'm the innovation manager of Iliad, and I'm responsible for capacity development and engagement. And that's why I'm here, part of where I'm here. I have a long experience in the Earth observation community. But the first speaker, I will jump directly to Arne-Jørgen Berre. He is the one who is going to introduce the topic of data spaces. He is a senior scientist in SINTEF Digital, but he is also an innovation director at the Norway, so artificial intelligence network, a huge one here in Norway, international, I even believe. He's been involved in multiple standardization works in bodies. He's involved in big data work, and also he's the scientific director of Iliad and involved in DITO, or the UN in a decade for ocean science. So Arne-Jørgen, I think I will give the floor to you now with that introduction. So welcome, and go ahead and introduce us to data spaces. You're muted, Arne-Jørgen.
Now I should be unmuted. And
Correct.
I'll show the first slide here. There.
Yes.
You should see that also. Very good. So I'll talk about European Ocean Data Space concept in the context of the Iliad Digital Twins of the Ocean. The context for the Iliad Digital Twins of the Ocean is how to bring a lot of relevant data from many different sources into the context of digital twins, plural that is, not only one twin. We see that there will be a lot of digital twins of the ocean, and they need to be managed as well as the data, combined with models, both analytical AI, machine learning, as well as physical models, and various kinds of visualizations and interactions. Today we'll have the focus on the bottom line here, where we talk about a common European ocean data space. We do see that there is a huge amount of data and data sources available related to ocean data, and subsets of this will be required for any digital twin of the ocean, in particular localized or sector-specific twins for certain areas. And for that, we started to look into the concept of European data spaces, which we are sharing, say, similar requirements and wishes with. So the context for this will be the common European data spaces, of which there are many in progress. And in particular, the Iliad project is under the Green Deal program. So for Iliad, it's quite natural to look at the Green Deal data space, which actually will be presented later today from two projects, the GREAT project and the All Data for Green Deal project. There is also other projects like the Agri data space that share various commonalities. And one of the points here is that between these data spaces, there is also a need for interoperability. For instance, in the ocean, we also have ocean energy, wind farms, offshore wind farms, wind energy, which will have data in the energy data space. And this is also related to the ocean data space. So it's not only these single data spaces, but there is also interoperability between those. So this is all evolving, and none of these have finalized yet. There is a lot of funding from the Digital Europe program for some of these data spaces shown here, and this is in current progress. So what we want to do now is to kind of visit the opportunities to get synergies with these activities also for the digital twin of the ocean, which is, the ocean is not one of those dedicated data spaces, but it could be in the future, and it certainly would benefit from being part of the Green Deal data space, as well as maybe expanding beyond this. So there are many various inputs into the data spaces concept, and one foundation can be found in some of these references here. Essentially, we can say that the data space concept is partially a European concept focused on by different organizations and the Commission. We saw the European Common Data Space Initiative. We have also the International Data Spaces Association and Gaia-X that have provided input to a report to the OpenDI project called Design Principles for Data Spaces. The BDVA, the Big Data Value Association, and the ADRA, the AI Data Robotics Association, has contributed to a number of recent books on designing data spaces and data spaces design, deployment, and future directions. If you go beyond this concept, perhaps a lot of similarities can be found with the data mesh architecture concept, where you also can find a number of books and references that has been done, say, outside of this community. It's basically our data management in the context of many sources, and where it's not likely that all the data can be put into one common data lake, which you might do if you have full control and can get the data you need for a certain purpose. So when we look at the broadness of ocean data, we do not believe that all of this data can go into one data lake, but we do need to manage all of this and be able to also identify the data needed for certain purposes, such as various digital twins. We also see that the design principles for data spaces are relevant, such as data sovereignty. The owners of the data should be able to manage this. It should be aspects of a decentralized infrastructure. It cannot really be centralized. We need to involve both public and private data, and need to have a way of handling data, both open data and protected data. And all of these are design principles that have been illustrated in some of these references above. And that also has been input to the initiative of the European data spaces, where there are many activities going on, and that's what we want to focus on today with some of these initiatives and supporting projects, looking a bit on the reference model of the international data spaces and Gaia-X and corresponding projects in the data space field, as well as discussing various aspects of how and when these can be combined with data lakes and other data storage solutions, and the advantages of this in the context of the creation of digital twins. So, as I said, a number of projects has already been started. One of these on the Digital Europe program is the Data Spaces Support Center, which started in October last year. So a number of the projects we are now talking about started just a few months ago, but they are now available in terms of their ambitions and motivations. So we will come back to this later in the discussion. Also to the underlying reference architectures that we have been looking at. So those that are familiar with Gaia-X would have seen kind of this X picture before. We have tried to relate this architecture to the needs of the Iliad Digital Twins of the ocean, which will actually be multiple twins on the upper level here. But in order to get access to the data that is needed for the data representation of a certain digital twin, it's good to have an ecosystem that provides open access or maybe restricted access to various data providers. This can also go from model providers and service providers, and an infrastructure that handle this with respect to identity and trust, federated catalogs, sovereign and controlled data exchange, and compliance with interfaces. So what we will be looking at is how these technologies that are emerging around this, around data ecosystem, can be taken to the advantage for the building of digital twins of the ocean. And in that context, we now are exploring the relationship to projects like GREAT and the All Data for Green data space and the Green Deal and others, such as the Data Spaces Support Center, to see how these projects can support each other. Just to give a little illustration of some of the underlying technology concepts, if we take a look at the initial architecture from the industrial data space, IDSA, as it was developed already a number of years ago, the idea is to have an ecosystem where data consumers and data providers can interact based on search for data and services and models in an open environment supported by brokerage and clearinghouse services, handling identity, authentication, authorization, access control, supporting semantics and vocabularies of the data that will be exchanged, and also how the data is reflected in services and models, and do that in a way where there can be control of ownership and access control for data. So we see this as a useful stepping stone into the data spaces. And in the Iliad architecture, this is the kind of high-level conceptual architecture, we see a staging of data before we get to the digital twin, data stored data on the front end and the models to the right, because there are so many data sources and data providers that have data on different levels in different ways, that we see a need for an intermediate ocean data space here that can handle the access and manage the interfaces towards all of these underlying systems, so that they can live both independently but also provide data as needed, supporting semantics, semantic harmonization, ontologies and other things that are needed for their federation and interoperability, and be able to serve this data into the data lakes and data stores that will be selected areas for data that will be in certain digital twins that will be part of this ecosystem. So we have underlying technologies that are now being, say, developed for this. We will also try to harmonize with other digital twin initiatives, such as the European Digital Twin of the Ocean, that has a dedicated data lake for the data that goes into, say, a more global European twin. And also other data that comes for the particular pilots and applications that we have that are for other areas. So we see that an ocean data space will be able to handle that concept in the same way as the common European data spaces will do that in various areas. So what we will do now is to seek synergies with projects that are dedicated for this. So in the context of Digital Europe, one project has already started a few months ago, the Great Green Deal Data Space Foundation project. And we're looking at how we can contribute with use cases for this, and we'll also hear more about the great project later today. And then we have the All Data for Green Deal, which started as a Horizon Europe or a project outside of Digital Europe, but as a Horizon project that also is dealing with data for Green Deal and semantic interoperability. So both of these projects are, of course, quite relevant as they are directly addressing this data space concept, and we'll see how that can adapt and be used in the context of the elements needed for the Green Deal, which then Iliad is a project in the community of. So that's the context setting, and what we hope now is to also hear from the great project, and first from the All Data for Green Deal, which might also mention some of the other data space project initiatives, so that we can take advantage of the evolutions of these and actually view the digital twin of the ocean as a user of the data space technology that will evolve from these projects. So that's my introduction to the concept of data spaces in the context of the digital twins of the ocean.
Thank you very much, Arne-Jørgen. That gave us a flying start. And thank you also to those who have participated in the poll. I'll publish that. While I'm publishing it, please, if you have questions to Arne-Jørgen that pops up right now, please ask them in the chat, and we will come back to a deeper discussion after all of the presentations. But if there are questions for clarification, for instance, that we can do immediately. But also for you to remember your question, it might be a good idea to write it in the chat. So I will end the poll now, and then I will share the results with you. Can you confirm that you see the results?
Yep.
Yep, good. So you see that there are actually a few of you, 14% of you already use data spaces, which is interesting. It would be great if you can say something, which data space and what context that is in the chat. We would love to hear that. Interestingly, also that 44% of you are planning to use data space. So it's a hot topic. There are 23% who are not quite clear, ready are planning yet, but consider to do it. Somebody is not going to do it, and somebody is 14% doesn't know. So thank you very much. This was very interesting to see. Do share the data spaces that you are using. That will be super interesting. And even if you are planning to use which data space or what context is that, that will be lovely. Thank you for that. Now, I will continue with the agenda and introduce to you the next speaker, which is Joan Maso. He is a principal investigator at CREAF and leading specialized group on geospatial interoperability, GIS, remote sensing. He has been involved in multiple standardization work, heavily involved in OGC, but also ISO. run and participated in a number of EU projects, Horizon projects, framework projects, and ESA. He has also engaged in international organizations such as the European Geosciences Union. Very much the way I think I met you, Joan, was in context of, it was GeoViqua, so it was Geo, and developing data sharing principles or data management principles of quality, but also in citizen science. So Joan, with that, it was super interesting to hear you're introducing the network or the coordination of data spaces. Yeah, Joan, you are also coordinating the EuroGeo action group on data spaces. So the floor is yours. I will stop sharing.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. So this is going to be an overview of data spaces in Europe, and since I'm the coordinator of the All Data for Green Deal project, so probably a little bit more on that one in particular. So first things first, data spaces. No, what are data spaces? But we have heard about Arne presentation that tried to cover this in a more generic way that I'm doing. In here, what I'm trying to do is just looking at the European Commission view of what a data space is. And they say it's bringing together relevant data infrastructures and government frameworks in order to facilitate the data pooling and data sharing. So in this very sentence, we have all what we need. There is the data pooling and data sharing. So it's deploying tools and services and so on for that efficient use of the data. We have the government structures that, well, they talk about EU legislation, but they also talk about transparency and fair. And we have also the part about the data infrastructure, the availability, and the interoperability, because as Arne said, this should be a soft infrastructure, so it should benefit from many elements that are already out there. When I approach that topic, I approached from the Green Deal approach, the Green Deal data space. So I had my, my environmental, if you want, scientific hat. And I thought that this is going to be about open data and open data and open data. But actually it's not completely, because of course we have data tools, data access, even the possibility to upload data, but we also have access control. That's because there is not only the Green Deal data space, there are others. And in all of them, there is this need to hold, or this view of enabling this digital economy. So this data spaces needs to be a place where there is access control, there is trust, and there is confidence in a way that then you can boost in innovation, because you can rely on not only the data space, but also in the other people playing in the data space. So that's something that we have to take into account. But at the same time, of course, there will be a governance that ensure fair and transparency and non-discriminatory access to the data. There will be rules to actually protect not just the personal data, but also the rights and the way that the European Union behaves. It is also a technical infrastructure that needs to have some security by design and so on, but also since it's decentralized, we will see this balance between a common technical infrastructure and a set of building blocks that are trying to work together in an interconnection and interoperable way, using sets of standards that we have experimented a lot in Inspire, but also with these new OGC APIs that are emerging, that are easier maybe to use in the new devices and infrastructures that we are deploying. So you have seen this slide already. Arne presented that. How many they are? 9, I believe. But actually, it is not that, because the situation is growing. Everybody wants to have a data space these days. And even the Commission is presenting this media data space, this cultural heritage data space, and recently, this Copernicus data space ecosystem that was actually announced, and I believe is gonna replace the Copernicus hub in the end. So the situation is growing, and also all these data spaces should work together. So there should be in the end some kind of interoperability between them. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the Green Deal data space and this project in particular. Our mission is actually to try and include in the data space things that maybe were not so much represented in what, let's call it, the environmental prototype data spaces that was Inspire. Even if it was never called a data space before. Let's include in situ data, let's include remote sensing, let's include citizen science, let's include Internet of Things, let's include artificial intelligence. And we have to do that collaborating with other groups, because we cannot do that alone. We want to demonstrate that that's possible in concrete examples on climate change, zero pollution, and biodiversity to solve the problems that we have there. Our proposal, and here you see our architecture. You are seeing the same thing. You see a box that actually represents the data space built with fair building blocks that are hexagonal in this case, and you are seeing from outside arriving different data sources. So we actually believe in the standardization, and we more. Some of our ones are already OGC members or the OGC itself. So we want to experiment with the deployment of these OGC APIs and demonstrate that that's the right way to generate integration and more integration. Of course, we will focus on end users. Our solution is about interoperability. We want to use also the sensor thing APIs, and this is something that we share with Iliad. We want to improve the semantic interoperability of the different data layers using semantic variables and other concepts, and we share that with Iliad. We want to improve the data quality descriptions and the metadata, and probably we share that with Iliad too. We want to work on the defragmentation and increase the data sharing and the fair and apply the shared principles. And of course, we share that with Iliad. We want to reuse existing shared infrastructures. It is not our mission to create a new one. So if you try and see one of these diagrams that express what the Green Deal is and which are the focus, you see some of the pilots that we have here in the environmental data. We will work on water quality lakes, and this is not data lakes. This is a real lake in the city of Berlin. We are working on biodiversity dynamics and corridors on the metropolitan area of Barcelona. And in air quality, we want to deploy sensors in northern Italy for this IoT aspect, and this is definitely for air pollution. I wanted to emphasize that there is in the Green Deal, there is a marine data aspect too. So definitely Iliad working there. And this integration of different data sources we are seeing here: satellite data, user-generated data, Internet of Things, socioeconomical data, whatever. So Iliad could be considered a contribution to the Green Deal data space, or could be considered a data space in itself. This is something that we will see in the future. But anyway, for the moment, definitely Iliad can contribute on the marine data for the Green Deal data space. We are using the same standards in the data spaces that Iliad is proposing to build the digital twin. And Iliad is also part of the EuroGeo Green Deal Data Space Action Group that actually Bente presented or announced before. I would like to say that we are not the only ones working on that. There are 3 more sister projects that DG Research actually awarded to. So we are the ones that are more on integrating in situ and citizen science and Internet of Things. The FeriCube is working more on the concept of data cube, so maybe more remote sensing and raster data. There is this usage project that is focusing on urban applications, and this V3 or VCube that actually wants to generate a biodiversity data cube to also push in that direction in the Green Deal data space. GREAT is part of this action group. And then there are other projects that contribute, maybe bringing infrastructure or data processing capacity, like the Open Earth Monitor. And data processing capacity is something that appears also here and there in the data space definition. Sometimes you see it, so sometimes you don't see it. Even talking about this, the very same data space. And these other projects, including Iliad and Eiffel and EO4EU, that are also contributing to the data space. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about the data space in general and our All Data for Green Deal contribution to the Green Deal data space.
Thank you very much, Joan. And as we can see, there's it's a very lively community out there with popping up new initiatives when it comes to data spaces. And you gave a very nice overview of what's happening right now. I see that there's a couple of questions in the chat, and I'm very grateful for that. And we will take answering those questions after Mattia has spoken. Before we introduce Mattia, I will share the results of the poll, where we asked you if you foresee the use of different thematic data spaces, now that you heard both about data spaces and data lakes, in your digital twin. 17% of you are planning to use multiple data spaces, and most of you, actually 37%, will combine both data spaces and data lakes. Currently, some of you are 10%, 11%, are not doing it yet, but you are considering the options, and some are not sure and do not know. So thank you very much for that results, for that answering our poll. And I will jump then directly to introduce the last but not the least speaker, namely Mattia Santoro. And you will meet him shortly. He is a researcher at the CNR in Florence with a background from computer science. He's been working on methods and technologies for environmental monitoring. He's involved in artificial intelligence work also, both nationally and internationally. And I do know Mattia from many years also, because he has been very active in the geo community. He's been working and still responsible for the GeoDAB, the Geo Discovery and Access Broker, and contributing to the GEOS platform operations. So with that, Mattia, we are very excited to learn about the GREAT project. So the floor is yours, Mattia.
Okay, thank you, Bente. I'm trying to share my screen. Okay, can you see my full screen presentation? Yeah.
Yes.
So good afternoon. As introduced by Bente, I'm here to present the GREAT project, which is the Green Deal Data Space Foundation and its community of practice. The project is funded under the Digital Euro program, and it is a preliminary action for the implementation of the Green Deal Data Space. It is a coordinating and support action. It is a quite short project, 18 months, and these are the partners that are involved in the project with IDC, which is the coordinator, and then we have all the partners that are listed here. The overall objectives of the project are, of course, establishing a community of practice for the Green Deal data space. It is to provide a high priority dataset list for data which is relevant for the Green Deal in general. It is to provide a technical blueprint for the architecture of the Green Deal data space, and to provide governance and business models input to the final object, which is the provision, the final objectives, sorry, which is the provision of a roadmap for the implementation of the Green Deal data space. So just to be very clear, this project is not going to implement anything. It is, as I said, a preliminary action whose main outcome for the European Commission is the roadmap for the implementation of the Green Deal data space. And inputs to this roadmap are the priority datasets, the blueprint, governance, business models, and of course, underpinning all of this is the construction of the community of practice, so with the involvement of the different stakeholders. The strategic actions that the project initially envisioned to address are the biodiversity 2030 biodiversity strategy, zero pollution action plan, climate change adaptation strategy, which you know, are quite well representative of the Green Deal scope, but of course the project does not in any way want to limit its scope to this or use cases only contributing to this, but is open to all that is relevant to the Green Deal, which is a quite, you know, wide scope. The timeline of the project, we started in September, and let's say that the first phase will finish at the end of the first year with the release of the initial outputs. So let's say the phase one outputs as far as the blueprint, the governance scheme, and the high value datasets list, as well as the roadmap. These will have then a second iteration until the end of the project at the month 18. So CNR is responsible for the technical blueprint, and so I'm going to spend a few slides about this. I want to clarify that again, we are not going to do a real, I mean, the actual design of the architecture of the Green Deal data space. We are going to provide, a technical blueprint, so the architectural approach which will guide the actual implementation design of the architecture. So, as it emerged also from the presentations that were the preceding presentations, the main challenge is that we are facing an ever-changing world, both from the science and policy context and from the technological context. As far as science and policy, of course, you have climate change, ecological transition, but also environmental impact on Earth, so with the recent pandemic. So we have to be ready for these kind of changes, and the policies are, of course, the European relevant ones, which is the Green Deal, the strategy for data, the Data Act, the AI Act, and so on. And the same goes for the technological context. The technology moves very fast, and so clouds, IoT, edge computing, machine learning, digital twins, and who knows what is coming in the next years. So here what we have to be prepared to is the change. We know that there will be changes, so they are not predictable, but they are not unexpected. So, oh, sorry. Okay. So, which are the high level and principles that are driving our technical blueprint? Of course, high flexibility and modularity, independence from any specific technology or provider. We want to, as it has already been said, we have to build on existing and future systems. So we want to preserve and facilitate the co-evolution of the system participating in the Green Deal data space, and of course, provide equal opportunities of access. And then, of course, also address challenges such as belonging versus autonomy. So to be part of the Green Deal data space should be seen as an added value for an existing system and as less as possible as a burden, reach a critical mass, and of course to be cost effective. So what we are approaching, what we are doing in the project is utilize the concept of the digital ecosystem as an approach. Here you want to focus on the service which the digital ecosystem provides to the society. In this case, we could think of something, sharing of trusted Green Deal data for the public. And this approach allows to design what has already been introduced and is based on the concept of soft infrastructure, which is composed essentially of two elements. Of course, the agreements, the technical standards also, in order to implement interoperability. And we envision also that there will be a set of logical components which will enable the creation of the digital environment. And here I list some of the possible ones. This is still a work in progress, so I will not spend time listing them. And of course, the governance, which is a very important aspect. Although it is not part of our blueprint work package, it has, of course, its own work package, and I put it here because it is very relevant for the blueprint design. Of course, we are building the community of practice, and we need also use cases for our work in order to validate also what we are doing and endorse this. So last week, the project published a call for use case, and here you find all the details, and you can find also from our project website the possibility to contribute with a use case that is very much appreciated. So here is the submission form if you want to be involved in the project. And we are having a webinar on the 1st of March 2023. And these are the links to the social media platforms and so on. And with this, I thank you. And I'm ready for taking any questions.